All right, we are live. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. So we have a really great SBJ live session today. As you can see here, it's called the Game Plan 2024, Navigating the Data-Driven Future of Sports Partnerships. So we have two really great speakers to work us through this discussion today. I'm your moderator, Taylor Bloom. I'm head of sports technology business here at SBJ, and I'm joined by RJ Krause, head of social at Core and co-founder of Hookit, and then Lauren Greenfield, VP of Global Partnership Strategy and Development at Monumental Sport and Entertainment. RJ, Lauren, thanks for joining us today, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
And for the audience, this is a kind of a special SBJ live session, in my opinion. Typically, we have like a moderator like myself and then some speakers. We go around in a discussion. But RJ and Lauren have also provided some visuals for us today, and we appreciate that. So we're going to kind of have a discussion plus going through some data and some visuals and some slides. So I think that's a nice touch today. And speaking of how we're going to be kind of interacting with one another, to everyone in our audience, this is a really popular SBJ live session. We have a ton of registrants. And so that means I really encourage you to use the chat functions, introduce yourself, and then ask questions. I will do my best to sift through any questions and work them into our conversation today. But this is a really cool component overall to these live sessions. So make sure you take advantage of that and ping folks and, introduce yourselves. We've had a lot of connections made in these virtual SBJ live sessions that then go into the real world. So we love seeing that happen. And that's just kind of a note for the audience. We're likely going to go 35 to 40 minutes on our chat today, but if we're on a roll, we'll go a little longer. It depends on questions. So there's no hard stop, but I like to say that there's a little bit of flexibility here. And then the last thing for my notes for everyone is a recording of this will be provided to all of our registrants. So if you can't make all of it, or if you come in late, etc., don't worry. Thank you for registering. That's one of the perks of joining us today. So with that, those are my housekeeping notes. Lauren, I'd love to just have you kind of do an intro, and then RJ. But Lauren, what's new and big in your world? Obviously, MSC made some headlines yesterday there in DC, but would love to kind of talk about that. And then also just intro us and your role and your day-to-day responsibilities right now as we sit here end of March.
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Greenfield. I oversee the Global Partnership Strategy and Development team here at Monumental. We sit within Global Partnerships and support the full portfolio of Monumental's properties. So with that, every day is different, but holistically, me and my team operate like an in-house agency designed to support all facets of revenue growth and retention, both with new and existing partners. We're sitting at an interesting juncture right now as we wind down the Caps and Wizards seasons, hopefully leading into a playoff push for the Caps, while also teeing off our NBA 2K season with Wizards District Gaming and gearing up for the upcoming Mystics and WNBA seasons. So it's a busy time. Every day is a busy day, but it's really exciting.
Appreciate that intro. RJ.
Hey everyone, RJ. I have spent the last 10 plus years digging into data and helping brands and rights holders understand what kind of value is coming out of their partnerships and how to optimize those. So co-founded Hookit quite some time ago, over 20 years ago, and then Core acquired us about 2 years ago. And since then, we've been really pulling the two platforms together to help brands and rights holders to both manage and measure their partnerships as well as their fans and their data, and really just helping them create more powerful partnerships all around. So very excited to take everyone through what we've got today. I'm really excited for Lauren to be discussing all these highlights that we're going to go through. Yeah,
that's great, RJ. So I'll tee it over to you because you have the slides ready to go. And again, to our guests, thanks for introducing yourself. I love seeing the messages pop through. As RJ and Lauren go through some of these slides, we'll be having a discussion. But again, I encourage all of you to ask questions. We can do our best to just kind of pause in places and digest as needed. But RJ, take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, Taylor. Cool. So today we're going to go through highlights of our annual State of the Industry report. So we've been doing this for about 3 years now, and we pull from all the different data sources we have available. This year we have a new data source, which we'll go through in a bit, that we're really excited about. Essentially just surfacing insights and trends in the world of partnerships, looking at actual deals and what the deal flow and the trends look like there, as well as the measurement side, and then getting some really good intel from industry insiders and experts. So the full report is going to be available for everyone to download on April 9th. We're just going to go through some of the highlights today and discuss some of the key takeaways. So I'm really excited to get Lauren's viewpoint on it, given that Monumental has a really wide breadth of properties that they manage, and a lot of different partners. So really excited to get Lauren's take on it. And then, like Taylor said, as we're going through this, please pop in questions, and we'll discuss those as we can. The full report is about 80 pages long, so there's a lot of detail in there. Today, what we've done is just extracted some of the highlights, and we'll talk through it. Before we go into it, just a really quick overview of Core, just to give you some of our background. I think most of you probably know or have heard of Core, but we are really focused on, like I said, just helping cultivate more powerful partnerships more than anything. We help rights holders on both the partnership side, sponsorship side, as well as fan management and data management. And then on the brand side, we really help with both the management and the measurement side. So working with a ton of awesome rights holders and brands, nearly 1,000 now that we work with globally. So one of our key areas of focus, though, is around bringing together the world of sponsorship management, which Core has been building software for ages, with the measurement side. So connecting those two, we think, is really the holy grail to identifying ROI, which is really what everyone's trying to do. You measure impact, and you'll see that in some of the highlights that we're going to go through. So that's what our goal is, to help pull those two worlds together to really tell that story. So we have a lot of really interesting data to be able to surface some of these insights. So kind of three buckets here. Number one being the actual sponsored deals. So like about 1,000 rights holders, brands use the platform to manage their deals, and they've opted into for us to be able to aggregate and anonymize some of that data to extract some really interesting stuff. So there's about 56,000 sponsorship deals that are the basis for a lot of these the deal insights. On the social and measurement side, we track pretty much everyone in sports and entertainment. So athletes, teams, leagues, events, venues, plus media, brands, about 500,000 entities in total. For this report, what we're looking at is all the content and activity that's posted by the sports properties. So athletes, teams, leagues, events, venues, about 150,000 in the platform. So we're looking at data over the past, or in 2023, so about 20 million, 19 million social posts, and all the engagement, viewership, and interesting data that comes out of that. And then the last bucket here is something new for the report, which we're really, really excited about, is we just completed an industry-wide survey, got about 1,700 answers to questions around partnership goals and objectives, challenges, and then future outlook. So excited to dive into that and show you what we've got. So first and foremost, I'm just going to go through some of like the top line highlights. So what is the state of the industry? What is the 2023 data revealed? And then each one of these, we're going to go into just a little bit more detail on the makeup of it and some insights there. And then we're going to have a discussion on each one. So number one, what we're seeing, and this is about the second year running that we're seeing this, is that there's a lot more, not a lot, but a lot more. There is more spend, about 4% more spend this year versus last year, but there's a lot fewer deals, so 14% fewer deals. So brands and rights holders are going deeper but narrower. So fewer partnerships, but they're going deeper with those partnerships that they do have. And we'll talk a bit about some of the implications there and kind of what Lauren is seeing in the space that lines up with that. Second is that social engagement, the audience, the power of social, and the value that brands are getting from it continues to rise. So we're seeing a 10% increase in engagement year over year. It's actually 26% increase in video viewership, especially with the advent and the push of Instagram Reels and TikTok. Seeing a lot of content going to video. And as a result of that, we're seeing an increase in brand value. During COVID, we saw a pretty sharp increase as sport really was consumed on social. We saw it flatten out, and now we're seeing that value and that engagement start to rise again. So that's exciting. And then lastly is that while probably obvious to most folks on the call, right? Sponsorship, from our industry survey, we're seeing that sponsorship is still very powerful and growing, but there are challenges that remain. Alignment is a big thing, right? It's critical, and there's some gaps there. And measuring ROI is really difficult. So getting the data and getting the ability to kind of report on that is super tough. So we're going to go through each one of these in a little bit more detail. First, on the deal insights. So, like I said, spend up slightly, deal count down. So brands are definitely going deeper and not wider necessarily. But when we look at our deal data, we're seeing about 53% of deal revenue still coming from signage and entitlements. That's pretty typical what we've seen in the past, but we are seeing an increase in spend on digital activation specifically, right? So when you look at like social and broadcast, obviously there's a lot of exposure that comes from your signage and your entitlements. But now we're seeing a lot more specific call outs and deliverables around digital. Secondly, we're seeing about 50% of deal revenue coming from just a few sectors. And again, no big surprise here, but we're seeing, and so those four sectors are financial, food and bev, retail, and automotive, which you could probably guess. But we're seeing a financial is at an all-time high in terms of spend. And then from our survey, we're seeing that nearly half of rights holders are actually looking to partner with some new sectors, some that have not traditionally spent a lot on partnerships, but are getting into the game. So logistics, insurance, and travel. And I think some of that is a result of kind of the post-COVID world, where especially travel, a lot of people are starting to travel again. So there's definitely an interest from the brand side. So that's the top line, what we're seeing in the data, but would love to turn it over to Lauren on, what are we seeing in the real world that kind of that aligns with this. Lauren, I know we had talked about the wider and deeper, the narrower and deeper trend, right? And you feel like you're seeing some of that within your properties.
Yeah, for sure. And it's really interesting to see the data back up what we're seeing and experiencing anecdotally. With us, we've absolutely seen several of our partners, predominantly those with national scale, retooling their sponsorship strategy and narrowing their portfolio of partnerships to go deeper versus broader, which I think is a good thing ultimately. For us, having multiple properties in our portfolio and being in a growth market like DC, it allows us to remain an attractive partner. But beyond that, it's really imperative that we remain super flexible and creative in how we approach our partnerships so that we can constantly tweak things throughout the course of the deal to ensure that we're continuing to meet those partner KPIs as they evolve. So whether that's pivoting assets that aren't hitting the mark or shifting from one property to another to target a specific demographic, we're doing everything in our power to be in constant lockstep with our partners and ultimately using the contract as a guidepost, but not as, an absolute requirement. I think that for rights holders, maintaining that flexibility and being open to evolving the partnership while it's in motion is going to be really critical when to keeping those deals afloat.
Yeah, for sure. That's something that we hear often from brands. Actually, is that flexibility is really key. And in some cases, the difference between a successful partnership and status quo partnership. So that's great. And not only that, but the ability to change on a dime, but also to be able to produce some really creative stuff as a result of what the brand is looking for.
Yeah, exactly.
Are there any sectors that you guys are any new sectors that you guys are looking to work with that you haven't in the past?
Yeah, for sure. I think that the travel space is really interesting, whether it's tourism, groups or even like government entities or cruises and kind of other like travel partners. And then another space that we're really closely monitoring it, and you've seen it with, the Carolina Hurricanes, most recent jersey patch deal, but is kind of in that the like construction space, and there's so many facets to that, whether it's the actual materials like, steel, or whether it's the construction providers, or whether, it's the kind of real estate sector. But that whole kind of ecosystem, I think, is starting to play in the sports sponsorship space, which has been really interesting.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, it's great to see there's just more and more interest. It feels like there's just more of a buzz around like sports these days for some reason, especially around the partnership world. We're just seeing a lot more activity, especially after COVID. I think that things are starting to, it feels like they're starting to pick up.
RJ, if I can jump in there, Lauren, a question for you. The theme of deeper and more narrow, you mentioned it a few times on these sponsorship deals. Has that been the cause for any adjustments on your team, Lauren, or in your department in terms of how you work with brands? If they're not spending with as many spots, but when they do choose to spend with you, are you getting more attention of theirs? Is there more you have to focus on in terms of your team and delivering for them? I'm just curious, kind of like, it's like a functional and process question for your department.
Yeah, well, so it's been interesting because that trend has aligned with us acquiring our RSN and rebranding as Monumental Sports Network. And so now all of a sudden we're really able to be this one-stop shop and integrate media into what was a traditional sponsorship or property kind of offering. And so I think the timing has been really great for us in our ability to kind of connect the dots that may have been missing or that might be missing with some of the other partners that the brands are kind of looking at. So I think it's really a combination of market and to some extent, we can't control whether or not our market is a priority for X brand. But I think we feel really good about, DC Baltimore is the third largest combined DMA in the country. So we're in a good spot there. And then also, what as an organization can you offer that your competitors can't? And really making sure that you're amplifying those benefits. And we have added value services, whether it's my strategy team, whether it's our business intelligence group that has a dedicated team of partnership analysts, whether it's our in-house productions. I think some of those like added benefits and being able to provide those elements and support for the partnership can really differentiate you from some of the competitors out there.
Yeah. Thank you. Makes sense. Okay. RJ, how do you want to proceed here? We do have a good question, but I'll let you.
If we have any questions from the audience, we can cover that. Else we'll head to the next highlight.
I think, let me ask this question from the audience. So it's from Russell Scabetti. A lot of folks know him. Russell, thank you. He's a well-respected business intelligence lead in the sports industry here. His question is, what are your thoughts on a data-driven methodology to determine the value of IP and trademarks and how that value can vary based on deal size, category, et cetera? So I'm curious, Lauren or RJ, feel free to discuss that, but this is one that I'm sure Russell's had to deal with firsthand, and so it's top of mind.
The old IP question. Yeah, this is as big of a holy grail probably as ROI is, honestly. Like, I personally have not seen any methodology that is like leading the charge. I think that a lot of different rights holders do it differently, but it is absolutely something that should be included in deals, given that there is obviously, brands are partnering with properties to, for lack of a better term, piggyback on the value that they have and that connection they have with fans. So IP is something that should be included for sure. Lauren, how are you guys handling it?
It's a really interesting nut to crack in terms of kind of figuring out and what that value is. And to your point, Russell, I think that it absolutely varies, not only the deal, the category, but also how much is that brand leaning into leveraging the IP and marks. And so kind of figuring out that valuation is imperative, but I don't know that anybody's quite cracked the code.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely data to be able to back it up now, where you can look at like social as an example and how people are engaging with a property compared to other properties. I think there's they're surveying off obviously that a lot of rights holders are doing to kind of get a sense of recall on like partnerships and such, but we can also implement that for understanding kind of the value of the property and how near and dear to their hearts it is, and kind of what the IP is there. But yeah, I've not seen anything conclusive, but it's definitely something that's top of mind for us at Core for sure, figuring something out. Cool. Yeah, I don't see any other questions, so we'll head to the next highlight. So social, as everyone knows, is continuing to rise. Right, it is becoming more of a focus within deals, and it's just the way that a lot of folks, especially the younger generation, are consuming sport. And it's not going away. It's not slowing down. We see even just this year, just recently, Messi crossed the 500 million follower threshold on Instagram alone, which is crazy. He and Ronaldo are the only two in the world, but there's 500 million people that are following them, billion plus people collectively. We see 33 billion collective or cumulative fans of sport on social media. It's 714 million new this year, so 2% follower growth. And Instagram remains the 800-pound gorilla. That's where most of the growth is happening. That's where most of the content is happening and engagement. TikTok is definitely starting to nip at their heels, but it's definitely a smaller scale, faster growth, smaller scale. When you look at the audience, it's probably 68% of that 33 billion or so are following athletes. And about 55% of that is following an athlete, team, or league in global football. So that's where kind of some of the dominance is. But again, Instagram is definitely leading the charge there still. We've seen an increase, a large increase in engagement year over year. Last year compared to the previous, there was about flat, but we're now seeing an increase in engagement again. Again, 68% of that engagement is happening on Instagram, about 45% of the engagement from teams. So interesting dynamic here where you see majority of audience is actually following an athlete, but the majority of engagement is happening with a team. And might be obvious to some, but obviously teams and leagues have full content teams that are dedicated to producing awesome content for people to engage with. So that's where I think that's coming from. But just interesting to see kind of the difference there from an engagement standpoint. Can you guys hear me still?
Yes. Yeah, we got you.
You just lost me. Yeah. All right. Cool. All right. And then all of that results in great brand value. So over $12 billion in ad equivalent brand value in 2023, which is up 3%. Good share of that came from the top five, which you'd probably guess, right? The swoosh is on many kits, as well as Adidas. Emirates has some really major partnerships. And then Red Bull, just hundreds and hundreds of athletes and events that they own. So, but about a fifth of that value is going to them. But we're tracking about 10,000 brands, so there's really quite a long tail that comes with that. But good to see that the brand value is continuing to increase. So all that said is, it's obvious that social media is is a place to connect with fans and engage brands, but you have to be balanced with it as well, right? So it is a place for you to create great relationships with fans and to get exposure for brands. But what we see is that the rights holders that are doing it best are really thoughtful about how they use the channel and the medium, right? And not going overtly promotional, but having really nice integrated campaigns and content series that puts the content and the fan first, and then integrates the brand nicely. And Lauren, I know we talked a bit about that and how you guys are approaching it, but would love to hear more and love for the audience to hear it.
Yeah. I mean, yes, social media is obviously critical to our business, and in many ways it's a lifeline to our fans, especially those out of market on both a national and a global scale. And it's also a powerful tool for our partners to engage with the fans. But that said, echoing your point, it's critical that it's leveraged correctly. I think that sometimes there's a misconception that social is unilaterally the right fit, and that's just not the case. For example, in our case, only about 30% of our fans are local. So if you're a local brand looking to, say, drive people into your respective business, then social probably doesn't make the most sense. But that said, where we're seeing a ton of success and having a lot of fun right now is we've really reimagined our social sweepstakes through a strategic partnership with Wit Contest, where we're gamifying and diversifying the sweepstakes experience, and with that, seeing massive growth in entries and engagement on behalf of the partners. So I think, again, to your point, RJ, it's really about being strategic and creative and weaving the brands in a way that's going to resonate with the audience and not just, shoving it down their throats.
Yeah, for sure. And we have quite a few great examples, many from Monumental, where, the social teams are really looking at the trends within social media, looking at what your own fan base and audience is resonating with. That's the beauty of social, is that you have this like real-time feedback, so you can see what's resonating and how people are engaging. And so the rights holders that are doing it best are taking that data in and learning and trying new things to engage a fan base first and foremost, and then being creative about how the brands are integrated. So
on that point, RJ, we have a number of good questions. Thank you everyone for submitting them, but there's one from Clayton that's, I think, really relevant to what you guys are discussing now. Clayton says, when you look at social engagement, is it important for sponsors that their engagement on social media be organic, or does boosting/paid promotion factor into the reach of branding? So I guess to me, it's like, okay, you create something good and organic and it's compelling, but then can you also boost it and that helps, or do you lose some signal and some opportunity there? How do you guys kind of look at that?
That's a great question. And Lauren, if you want to talk about your experience, I can kind of talk through what we're seeing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, again, it goes back to understanding what the partner's objectives are, and not to skip ahead to the kind of third bucket we're going to talk about today, but in terms of being aligned, are they looking for just brand awareness and reach at the highest levels? To me, that's, where an organic platform comes into place. For example, we have Robinhood, who's our jersey patch partner on the Wizard side, on trades and transactions. Every time, a player leaves or joins the organization, their branding is visible. And not only is there connectivity there because they're our jersey patch partner, but those are also our highest impression and highest engaged posts. But then we also have partnerships where a partner's really looking to achieve a specific goal. So with Amtrak, they're really looking to promote travel on the Northeast corridor. So when we're playing Boston, Philly, New York, et cetera, and we're layering in boosted and paid promotion, of those matchups, and we can really exponentially amplify the impact on their behalf.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what we're seeing, so first off, boosting is an amazing strategy, I think. But like Lauren said, you want to be thoughtful about how you're doing it and for what partners you're doing it, making sure that it's aligned with what their objectives are. But it is a great way for you to get in front of even new folks, new potential fans, and get your brand partners in front of more people, more reach. What we're seeing is that some of the more forward-thinking rights holders, and Monumental included, are looking at the data in near real time and seeing what they should boost and when, and being really timely about it to kind of ride the wave of engagement and to really maximize the exposure. And we're seeing a good addition and boost in value, brand value coming from that as well.
100% would agree with that.
And we definitely encourage rights holders to allocate actually activation budget to account for that, because it is a great strategy to drive maximum brand value.
For sure. And just to add on to that, I think there's two ways to approach it, whether it's just a generalized bucket of funding, against your department that can be allocated when needed if a campaign is underperforming or if there's a critical renewal coming up or, for whatever reason, or to allocate it into the deal, especially if, in the Amtrak example, they're looking for very specific, success metrics to have that allocated into the deal and be able to apply it, as RJ mentioned, by monitoring the data and seeing when it's most relevant.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I know there was a couple other questions that came up, but those are actually, we'll cover some of that in this next section. So unless there's anything else, Tyler, did you have anything you wanted to cover on this?
You read my mind. No, we can proceed and we'll circle back to some of these questions. They're excellent questions. So thank you, everyone.
Right on. So the last kind of highlight here is just the fact that obviously sponsorship is powerful. I think we're all here and aware of that. Brands are obviously spending more and more every year on sponsorship, but there are challenges that remain, and there are also many opportunities that remain. Right. So what we're hearing is that the probably the biggest challenge is around alignment. So making sure that both sides of the table are aligned on both fit, like leading into a partnership, right? Is this the right fit for us? Do our values align? Do our objectives align? But then once you're in the partnership, making sure that everyone's on the same page with what the partner is trying to get out of it. What's the brand's objective? And those things change often. And we talked, Lauren, really briefly earlier about it, but the ability to be flexible with that and be overly communicative on extracting some of those objectives from the brand, or the brand being proactive and making sure that that's known. That's really critical. We're seeing that 63% of brands feel like their partners don't fully comprehend their goals, and so I think that's something that the whole industry can work towards, is and it can be solved by simple communication and the ability for the rights holder to be flexible. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Number two is really measuring impact, right? So obviously rights holders want to increase revenue, brands want to increase return on investment, and data is really what sits in the middle of that. And so there's a lot of data available and out there. That's one of the goals at Core, is to help make sense of all that, aggregate it, and report on it, and be able to extract insight that you can use to make better decisions. But this is definitely a challenge for both sides of the table. 58% of rights holders, so they have difficulties measuring impact. Some of that is related to not necessarily knowing exactly what a brand is trying to do or wants to do, and measuring those objectives against it. And then 42% cite lack of access to the data itself. Even though there's data everywhere, sometimes it's difficult to make sense of what matters and what doesn't. And then lastly, and one of the opportunities that brands, while they are going narrower and deeper, brands are looking for new opportunities and new spaces to invest in. Number one on the list is women's sports. 54% of the brands surveyed said that they are looking to invest more in women's sports. in addition, invest more in sports and team deals. And then 42% say that they want to invest and expand their athlete coverage, both on the pro and the college side. So I know there was a question about that, and we'll jump into it in a little bit. But that is something we're seeing, is that diversification by sport, by property type, and then getting into like individual athlete and NIL deals is something that's on brands' radar. So first, I guess discussion wise, let's hit the alignment question, right? Lauren, we talked about this. How do you guys approach when you're going to and you're in discussions with a potential partner? Like how do you guys, and what types of things do you look at to determine fit?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I'm most proud of the work we do here is we really don't offer any cookie cutter partnerships. Every single one is tailored to the partner's objectives. So conversation one is always understanding what the brand's objectives are, and then building and tailoring assets that meet those objectives. That said, those can evolve throughout the course of the partnership. So we work really hard as a group, whether it's leveraging our business intelligence team, and the constant communication that our partnership marketing team is in, plus the support of my team to measure those KPIs throughout the course of the partnership, both through third parties and in-house surveying, and to measure what's working and what's not. And then also, to your point, just having that line of communication and that ability to be transparent and, hear from the partner, like, this really isn't hitting the mark. Okay, great. Let's talk about what might, and offer some solutions, and just constantly being very solutions oriented and minded throughout every phase of the partnership.
Cool. There's actually a question that's related to this I wanted to bring up too, from Brad Zimmerman. So he said, with team deals, is there a consistent ask or set of rights that the brands are looking for, or is each deal completely different from the next? Like, what are you guys seeing in that world?
I think they're really different and unique. And I think that's part of what makes this industry so fun to work in, is that every brand is different, and those brands are evolving, right? So, one brand may be starting at the top of the funnel and really looking for brand awareness and to get their name out there. So they're looking at those entitlements, those jersey patches, those signage elements. And then once that has kind of proved successful, then they're looking to move down the funnel and really look at opportunities for conversion. And so it's really, it's not a one size fits all for sure.
Yeah. That's good. And that's what brands want, which is great.
Yeah.
So and what we're seeing in data is, like I mentioned earlier, signage and entitlements make up over half of the revenue, but there's so much nuance within that, right? I mean, as you know, right, there's a million different ways to approach signage and entitlements. What we're also seeing is actually number 3 on the list is just tickets and hospitality. So that's something that we're consistently seeing in majority of deals out there. And then 4th is digital. So we're seeing a lot more specific call outs in deals and contracts around digital activation. So although those are kind of consistent, how you go about doing that and delivering on that is totally different for every brand, like Lauren said.
For sure. And there's, for those who don't know, we had a conversation with one of our partners, and we're talking about a traditional suite, and they asked us, can we use the suite outside of game hours? And it really allowed us to flip the model on its head entirely. And so we built basically a business center for them in the arena that they're able to use to host business meetings 365 days a year during the day, and then transition that into a hospitality experience for the game or concert at night. But again, like that mentality of, even though it's never been done before, let's do it, instead of just, yeah, sorry, no, suites are only available, for events.
That's very cool.
Lauren, I love that that idea came from the brand themselves too. I think that's a really good point. Obviously, you guys were receptive to it, but some of these ideas like couldn't come from you guys because you're just not. It's not your thing you're living, and that for them, they're like, "Hey, can we use this amazing property you have in a different way?" I think that's something that a lot of people can learn from. It's a two-way street when with the alignment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. That's very cool. So second highlight, right? Measuring impact, the challenge across the board. We're seeing a lot more interest lately on both sides of the table to be able to kind of collect, aggregate, and make sense of this data. It's like I mentioned in the beginning, that's one of our main focuses. But we have a good question from Seth Greenberg on this, Lauren, that I think you could address best. So when measuring the performance of your sponsorship assets, do you find yourself benchmarking that performance against the other properties in your market, or is it more benchmarked against comparable teams within your league?
It's a really good question. I think it's primarily focused on probably the latter, but honestly, I'd throw a third in the mix, which is benchmarking against themselves, right? So like we really focused on year over year growth, whether that's impressions, engagement, brand lift, conversions, etc. I think that's really been our primary focus. And even during the span of a season, so with Robinhood, right, where we launched at the beginning of the Wizards season, being able to measure, by quarter throughout this first year and show the lift in recognition as a partner and consideration as a potential client. I think that that's really where we focus most of our energy as opposed to benchmarking against other properties either in the market or elsewhere.
Yeah, that's a really good call out. And that's actually what we're seeing in the data as well. Like first and foremost, find the metric that matters for each partner because they're going to be different. And that's one way to make sense of the data as well, to be flexible and to be thoughtful about what your partner is trying to do. But then, yeah, time over time is the best benchmark. Like, are you improving? Are you working towards the goal that your partner has and that you have for yourself?
And then, sorry, one thing I'll add too is we also do a lot of comps against just the general population in the market. So Wizards fans, Caps fans are, more likely than the general DMV population to X, and just showing, right, like you can be a traditional advertiser in this market, but that doesn't necessarily equate to that intangible value of engaging with sports fans.
Yeah, that's a good call out. So you're basically indexing your audience against kind of the norm.
Yeah, exactly.
That's very cool. Actually speaks back to Russell's question on IP as well, right? Like if your fan base is more what your partner is looking for, then that's really intrinsic IP.
Exactly.
Cool. And then on the third bullet here, so new opportunities. And I know you have some good insight on this, Lauren, with the Mystics, but we're definitely seeing that trend of, women's sports being a really major focus for brands, in addition to athletes and NIL. But women's sports lately has been on a tear, which is amazing. Would love to hear, what you're seeing out there in the field.
We're absolutely seeing the trend. Our ownership group were early adopters and believers in the power of women's sports. And so it's not a space that's new to us, but kind of seeing brands catch up and realize the value there has been great. I think that, it's really about understanding why a brand is interested in women's sports. Is it because it's hot right now, or is it because they're really looking to engage with the demographic, audience of our team? And if the latter, then building a partnership that really hits on what they're looking to do. So that's kind of how we've been approaching it.
Cool. Are there any areas, you have a nice diverse portfolio, right? Are there any other areas of interest that you're seeing kind of on the rise?
It's interesting. The area that I've personally noticed tremendous growth in, and especially coming out of COVID, is in brands wanting to anchor a partnership around a community platform that's endemic to their mission. So that's everything from broad issues like financial literacy, STEM, et cetera, to hyper local issues and wanting to have a tangible impact on the DC community. But I'm definitely seeing more and more partnerships looking to kind of have that community impact piece be the anchor of the deal, and then leveraging the different assets to drive amplification, awareness, raise funds, promote, et cetera, around it.
That's great.
What about you, RJ? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing, we look at the data, so we're seeing that interest around definitely women's sports. We're seeing, gaming was and remains to be a really interesting place for brands. Some of them are hesitant because they don't know much about it. So I think educating brands on what it is, what the space looks like, would help to facilitate partnerships there. And then obviously NIL, similar thing too, where, brands aren't necessarily as up to speed on it. There's a lot of consultants out there that can help, but those two spaces I think could be helped by a little bit more education. But again, like we've been talking about, understanding what the brand's needs are, and what they're trying to do helps to understand where they should, invest their money.
And I saw Zachary Hurst asked a question about if we've seen data on companies transitioning from spending sponsorship dollars with teams to individual athletes or influencers. Are companies shifting those funds, or are they just spending more on sponsorship overall?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of, I don't want to call it double up, but like basically compounding impact, right? Where if you sponsor the team or club plus some of the athletes on it, there's like a 1 + 1 = 3 effect there. And so I think that the brands that are able to do that, they're going to be investing more, but they're going to be getting, outsized return as a result.
I'm glad this question was asked. I was going to ask this quickly to you guys. With NIL and brands getting used to spending on individual college athletes, at some point, those top tier college athletes that they spend on, they will become professional athletes. Are the brands going to stick with them, or are they going to gravitate more towards the larger team that those athletes now are a part of? How do you view? It's a specific thing, but NIL is so enormous now in college level. I'm curious the downstream effects that you're seeing on the sponsorship side.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they've built equity into that partnership, and so I think we've seen examples where the brands are staying on board. There are some, like NAL is interesting because there are deals where it's kind of a one-off campaign, right? It's not like a long-term partnership. In those cases, we're not really seeing much carryover. But in the case where a brand is like investing in an athlete and then doing like a long-term deal with them. When they turn pro, they're typically sticking with them, which makes sense, right? I mean, you built up all this equity, and the fan base is aware of the partnership. So yeah, it wouldn't make sense to cut right when they go pro.
And again, I think it just goes back to, every brand and is different and has its own objectives, right? Are you leveraging these athletes or these personalities to launch a new campaign or a new product? Or are you aligning with them the way like a Nike would, of like who they are intrinsically as an athlete, as a person throughout their journey? I think they're two very different applications.
Yeah, for sure. And in the NAL space, it's definitely interesting to see how, people are just still figuring it out. And a lot of what we've seen successful, and like, JMI and Learfields and Playflies of the world are doing really well, is like taking school deals and then pulling in athletes as well, or vice versa, and getting that compound effect. So, but it all comes back to like, what is the brand trying to do, and building a strategy that hits their needs, right? So there's a bunch of different options now for brands, and so now it just comes down to putting together the best, most the deal that makes the most sense for what they're trying to do. Cool. I don't think we have any more questions on this note, so we'll head over to our kind of key takeaways and then wrap it up from there. Sound good?
Great.
Love it.
All right. So, and this is something from the report. So when you download the report on April 9th, which I'm sure everyone on this call is going to do, you'll have this as kind of your key takeaway. So a couple things here, and we can talk through, once we go through these, we can talk through, Lauren, if you have any that you're interested in kind of highlighting. Number one, we've talked about, right, is alignment, understanding where the gaps are, understanding that there is a gap in communication around objectives and being consistent about it, and having those discussions often, early and often. That's a key. Digital dominance. So brands are definitely prioritizing digital and social assets. It's coming through in the deal data. We're seeing more line items, specific to digital, where in the past it was either an add-in or throw in, or just assume that it was going to come from signage entitlement assets. Measuring impact is critical, like we talked about. There's challenges in doing that, and that really comes back to understanding what your partner's trying to do, and then having a good knowledge of the data available, and then tying those two things together, identifying the metric that matters for each partner, and reporting on that often. That's one of the things that brands cite, is that they like to get updates more often than not, but not overkill, right? So you have to find that balance, and work with your partner to understand, like, when do they want data. Communication, collaboration, again, goes back to the flexibility comment of, being able to understand what your partner's wanting, what they need, and deliver on it, and be flexible to deliver. Selective partnerships. So being focused on the right fit on the onset, right, before the partnership even begins. Knowing that it's a good fit, the values are aligned, your objectives are aligned, is just going to make that partnership more successful in the long term. And then lastly, just using social, as best you can to optimize both fan engagement as well as brand exposure. There's a lot of opportunity there, but be strategic about it, and don't kind of overdo the brand promotion. So those are kind of the 6 key takeaways. Lauren, do you have any like parting thoughts on any of these?
Again, I think it's just really interesting to see the data align so closely with what we're seeing and experiencing anecdotally. So I'm really excited to dig into the report in full, and kind of be able to leverage these data nuggets to tell the story, as part of kind of the entire process that we go through on our side.
Awesome.
Great. Well, thank you both. This is the exact dynamic we were looking for. Love the visuals. I always love a good takeaway slide. So RJ, this is a great way to end it. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us and bringing your perspectives from Monumental and DC there. RJ, remind us, so this is obviously just a snapshot of the overall report. Where do people go on April 9th to get the report? What's an easy way to access that?
Yeah, just go to coresoftware.com, and there'll be a big old link there to download it. Awesome.
And as a reminder to our attendees, who, by the way, you all were wonderful, excellent questions. Really appreciate it. You really added a lot to this. This is all recorded and available to anyone to watch on demand after, anyone that registered, that is. So thank you very much to the many people that registered. And then, of course, RJ and Lauren, you guys really drove a great conversation here today. So thank you.
Cool.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Lauren. All right. Bye, all.